Welcome to Know This Live. I'm Zinhle Essamuah. President Biden hit the road this week, heading to Wisconsin to get that state and its lawmakers on board with his infrastructure plan. He wants to bring the nearly $1 trillion deal agreed to by a group of bipartisan senators across the finish line. Joining me to discuss this and more is White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Zinhle. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and I want to start with a study by researchers at the Wharton School. It was out this week and it found that the infrastructure deal would slightly increase economic growth across the country. What industries and parts of the country do you expect that economic growth and action to happen?
Well, first, we expect the growth to hopefully happen across the country. And what has not been determined yet, Zinhle, is where exactly this funding will go. Every state, in our view, will benefit, but there'll be a competitive process for grants and funding that will go to fund these infrastructure projects across the country. That's part of what needs to be figured out in the weeks ahead.
And which industries do you anticipate benefiting the most?
Well, we certainly expect this bipartisan bill, I should say, to help create millions of jobs, a lot of them union jobs, many of them construction jobs, rebuilding roads and railways and bridges, but also rebuilding, eliminating, I should say, lead pipes, replacing those so kids can have access to clean drinking water in schools and communities across the country. Rebuilding broadband lines to ensure that people across the country, the 35% that don't currently have access to broadband, rebuilding our electric grid, rebuilding charging stations, or I should say, building charging stations across the country. So a lot of these jobs they're going to be good, high-paying union jobs across the country, but they're going to be about traditional infrastructure as we think about roads and bridges, but also industries of the future where we can still help create millions of jobs.
And you just laid out roads and bridges are going to be invested in, electric vehicle infrastructure, clean drinking water, broadband are definitely areas of investment. But the details of how that will practically be executed do remain thin. So are there conversations going on about how to drill down on this? And what will the new infrastructure look like in practicality?
Well, here's what we do know. This is the largest investment in rail since the invention of Amtrak. This is the largest investment in infrastructure in nearly a century. And when you talk about areas like broadband, what we're talking about is making broadband accessible to 100% of people across the country. So it means doing everything that's required. We have the funding needed to get that done. And when we talk about replacing lead pipe, and making sure kids have access to clean drinking water, we're talking about replacing every single lead pipe across the country. There are some questions, as you noted, that will need to be figured out, including how we're going to determine the funding that will go to repair these bridges and railways and roads across the country. That will go through a competitive bidding process. Some of it will, a lot of it will, and that will be determined over time. But what people in communities across the country can be assured of is they're going to have access to broadband. Their kids are going to have clean drinking water, and a lot of their bridges and roads are going to look better and help them get to work faster and more easily.
And you're highlighting what I know President Biden has referred to as a once in a generation investment. And the big question then becomes how is it going to be paid for, especially as we're hearing from experts and even nonpartisan economists saying the math with the intended cuts does not add up to the cost of this bill.
Well, we disagree with that. First of all, many economists will tell you that this pays for itself over time. We're not relying on that. What we are relying on is a number of agreed to pay fors between Democrats and Republicans who agreed to this package. The biggest one is going to be tax enforcement. And what a lot of economists have suggested is that our estimates are even conservative on that front. That this is an area where we can help make sure there's more investment in the IRS and we can make sure people who are the wealthiest Americans are actually paying what they owe. That can help pay for a good chunk of these investments, infrastructure investments that the president has proposed and that there's bipartisan agreement on.
And I know some of those nonpartisan experts who have criticized the funding of this bill have said that while the White House is pressing for historic investments in the IRS, it's unlikely that Republican lawmakers will be in favor of coming down on wealthy tax folks or big corporations and evaders. What do you say to that?
I would say that 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats already agreed to that as part of a bipartisan package. And we anticipate there will be more support because that is an area where it is just asking people, ensuring that people pay the taxes they owe. What we didn't do here is cross what was a red line for many Republicans, not for the president, but was changing the 2017 tax break that were put into place, which the president continues to disagree with. He continues to believe we need to change the corporate rate. We need to change the individual rate to help pay for additional proposals. But this is an area where there has been, it does not violate that red line for many Republicans. And it is an area where all we're talking about here is ensuring that people pay what they owe. And that's something that a lot of people should be able to get their heads wrapped around, including many Republicans.
And notably, the plan was almost derailed last week after President Biden shared that he wouldn't sign the deal without a separate reconciliation package. Of course, he walked back those statements after criticism from both sides of the aisle. But I do wonder, is the push for bipartisan support worth watering down the bill as it stands?
First of all, we don't see it that way in any way, shape, or form. The president absolutely plans to sign this bipartisan infrastructure bill, a historic investment, once in a century investment in infrastructure that's going to help communities across the country into law, including a down payment on climate and addressing the climate crisis. He also is simultaneously pushing for a reconciliation bill that will only require 50 votes and will include a number of the key investments he has proposed, including climate tax credit, including a number of components that will help make housing more affordable, including components of the American Families Plan, an extension of the child tax credit, making universal pre-K a reality, covering the cost of community college. Those are all key priorities from the Biden administration that are going to be in this reconciliation package we're pushing forward on. And the president's going to work his heart out to get both pieces signed into law and a reality for people across the country.
And on that, but will he and is he willing to pass this infrastructure bill as a standalone if that becomes necessary?
He certainly expects, hopes, and is going to do everything possible to make sure both pieces of legislation become law and that he can sign them both into law. And we're going to leave it to leaders in Congress, Speaker Pelosi, Senator Schumer, who both want to see these pieces of legislation move across the finish line to determine the sequencing and the mechanics of it. But he was out there earlier this week in Wisconsin. He's going to be out there making the case. And that's what the people in Congress want him to do, which is to go explain what's in these packages, how people across the country would benefit. So that's how he's going to spend his time. He's going to leave the mechanics to leaders in Congress.
And to turn to some of the big news of the week, I know this week EPA Administrator Michael Regan pointed out that the wildfires across the country that are happening are an example of the consequences of the climate crisis and how it will impact infrastructure moving forward. What's the cost of inaction when it comes to climate?
There's a huge cost of inaction. And that's why in this bipartisan package, there is funding, pivotal funding, to ensure that we are rebuilding our infrastructure in a way that is resilient to the climate, to make sure we are protecting it for the future. Look at what happened in Texas earlier this year as it relates to the winter storms. We're seeing certainly impacts in Florida and across the country of infrastructure not being built in a way that is planning for climate and the changes in the climate. What I will also say is that in this package is a huge down payment on addressing the climate crisis. And that includes everything from investing in electric vehicles to replacing lead pipes, making sure clean drinking water is a reality for families and kids across the country, and cleaning up old wells that are really an impediment to communities moving forward around the country as well. This is a down payment, but the president wants to do more, including climate tax credits, which is a pivotal part of what he'll be pushing for in the reconciliation package that we're working to move through Congress as well.
And notably absent from the infrastructure plan is investments in maintenance and renewal or monitoring of major properties and lands. I'm thinking of this especially, of course, because of the tragedy we've seen out of Miami where a condo collapsed, leaving dozens dead, hundreds missing. Given that, is the White House considering issuing federal guidance about how buildings need to be maintained following this tragedy?
I think where we are now is there was an announcement just last night about an investigation into the root causes here of this horrific tragedy in Florida. And we want to see that investigation play out. There is a lot of informed and compelling analysis about what happened here, what we can do to prevent it from happening in the future. But we're going to wait for that investigation to conclude. And then, of course, we will take a look at that and make policy decisions accordingly.
And you've said that you hope this plan reaches across the nation, but you've also laid out a state-by-state plan for how this deal will affect different people in varying states. But the money hasn't been lineated for how much each state will get. So what can residents of each state know and expect in the coming months when it comes to this bill?
I think residents and people across the country can know that they're going to have access to broadband if they don't have it now. They can know their kids will have access to clean drinking water, and they can know that when they look at their at how they're going to get to work, they're going to have more access to options for public transit. This is the largest, enormous investment in public transit as well, which is going to help a lot of lower income communities that don't have as much access as they should absolutely have. There is going to be a bidding process that will determine exactly which bridges will be repaired, exactly where funding will go to different airports, et cetera. That will need to play out over the coming months. But what people across the country should know is that this is going to improve their lives, make it easier to get to work, and make sure that we are competitive with other countries around the world.
And I want to turn and end on other initiatives that I know are high on the administration's priority list, like gun control and gun reform. If this bipartisan bill is facing pushback, which we've seen, how will other legislation fare?
Well, look, I would say that the president continues to believe that by passing a bill, signing a bill into law that puts in place universal background checks, making the assault weapons ban a reality, again, something he fought for when he was a senator and helped get passed in the 90s, are going to be initiatives he's going to continue to fight for. And they're broadly supported by the American public. So he's going to continue to advocate those and knows that it's not always easy. We do hard things in government. He's going to push for hard things. He also took a number of steps just last week, and additional steps, I should say, to address gun violence, make it harder for people across the country who shouldn't have a gun to get access to a gun. So he's not going to just wait for Congress to move. He's going to also continue to take actions that he can take with executive authority.
Well, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thanks to everyone for watching. This has been Know This Live. I'm Zinhle Essamuah.